Makes me think back, perhaps a day when I was sitting somewhere out there. And it's really a very great pleasure to be here. Now, when I would have been sitting back there, I would have asked myself, okay, today one more minister is coming and he's going to give one more speech which we'll all have to listen to. So here's the good news. I don't have a speech. So I'll tell you what I do have. I have a piece of paper, this big, which I sat early in the morning and I asked myself, what could I say which would be relevant to you? What would be my message if I were in your place? So I want to speak very briefly on two subjects, and then very honestly, I would much rather listen to what interests you. Please feel free to ask me anything you want, and I will reply with whatever I want. So I see today in a way as the voice of experience, that's me, dealing with the sources of energy, that's you. And hopefully at the end of the day, I will walk away with more energy, and some of that experience maybe will rub off onto you. So what really was in my mind as I think of all of you? I know I have come to an IIT and I heard what the director and the chief minister said. IITs are actually among the best recognized Indian brands in the world. I mean, if you go anywhere in the world, and I've lived 40 years in other countries, one thing which everybody knows, they all know IITs. And in fact, what the director raised, the possibility of IITs going out, it is something, it's something which in my mind should have happened a long time ago. Today, the new education policy provides for it, and I hope one day in the very not distant future, we will actually see it happen, and I hope very much that you are one of the IITs whose footprints extend abroad. So, but when we think IIT, we think engineering, right? But I want you to think of engineering not as a profession, not as a profession alone. I want you to think of engineering as a mentality. Because to me, a non-engineer but one who's traveled around in the world, an engineer actually has a problem-solving approach. And in engineering, if you don't know it, you don't think it doesn't exist. You think you haven't found it. And to my mind, today, the leadership which engineering institutions and engineering products can give to the country is to actually look at our hundreds and thousands of problems and tell yourself, I can find some answer to it. It will never ever be a complete answer, but it will be an answer. And what I saw the time I spent, being exposed to some of the innovations and the startup ideas and suggestions you have, I saw answers out there. I saw answers to problems which have existed, in our lives, which maybe in other institutions or maybe in another time, people would not have given that much thought, mind space to solving those issues. So, and I say this because I truly believe today, I can almost feel the country shifting gears. That when we talk today about a startup policy, when we talk about a skill policy, when we look at Prime Minister's research fellows, when we think of an innovation mission, when we see that, startups are not just a nice catchy word which happens in other people's countries. It is actually in front of your eyes. You can see, young people like you develop ideas, take it into the business world, make it happen. And that's, that's really a state of society which didn't exist when I was your age, and I truly envy you for it. Now, the second thought which occurred to me, and I say this today as a minister in the government, what is it that we can do to actually, I would say, spread that problem-solving, engineering frame of mind? We can do a lot really by focusing on the enablers. It starts with very basics. Today, the engagement I had before this was a conference called Nadi 3.0. It was about how, how rivers have shaped civilization's connectivity. But I look at something as basic as water. Water is life. And yet, we have a situation 75 years after independence, where a large number of households do not get water in their homes. Just as till a few years ago, a large number of houses didn't get power in their homes. And, to a lot of people, it is something which troubles you. I think to some people, they just accept it. But as someone who traveled around in the world, I can tell you it hurts you. The idea that others have come that far ahead, that very basic things were not available in our country. And when I think of the changes in my life and that of my generation, why these last 8 years from 2014 have been very important for us is that long-standing issues that we knew existed, we did not approach it with that engineering frame of mind that I'm speaking to you about. We did not have a leader who said, okay, in my tenure, I will make sure every house has a power connection. Every house has a water connection. People will own homes. That I will ensure everybody goes to school, particularly all girls go to school. If there is an impediment to going to school, of which toilets were a big one, I will fix it. I will ensure once they go to school that there is a skilling opportunity for them, that there is from that there are employment opportunities, there are innovation opportunities, and you actually then see, once you start, approach our country, our society with its age-old problems, you then see how these now suddenly start to change. So a lot of what we are trying to do today, there is an old saying that for a hungry person, you can give them fish, but if you really want to help them, teach them fishing. So my first E to you today was engineering. My second E to you today is enabling. That if you can actually enable a society to have the capabilities, to have the mindset to sort its problems, then there's no limit to the change that we can do. I also have a third E to describe our challenges. It's employment. Now, again, you would say, okay, what's so great about it? It's so obvious. But think about the debates in our society. You have a debate, how do we distribute what we have better? It's a very legitimate debate. You have a debate, how do we produce more? How should growth be hastened? Completely understandable. But if we want to get our society right, it is never completely about production. It is never completely about distribution. To find the right balance, it is actually about what impact it has on employment. And there too, there is a change which is happening. We've had growth, a very strong growth for 25 years from the 1992 reform. But if you actually look at employment the rise in employment did not track the rise in our economic growth. And the reason was we didn't put employment at the center of our definition of success. So when I sort of contemplate your future, what would be the next 20 years? I would very much hope that we are able to build an India that is very focused on employment, and to my mind, employment finally means more manufacturing, it means more self-employment, it means formalization of the economy, it means more startups, it means really maximizing the spread of technology. So an India which is more employed, an India which is better enabled, an India, as I said, which has an engineering mindset. Because again, as a global traveler, and a global traveler with a sense of history, the big countries of the world today, America, Russia, China, they have actually in their leadership have had a tremendous input of engineers, because engineers have actually had a very, very critical role in that big thinking, as I said, in the problem solving, in actually taking visions and getting it down on the ground. So that's the vision of India that I wanted to share with you. But I also want to very briefly tell you a little bit about what I do, because I don't get a captive audience that often. So let me give you a sense too of what is happening on the foreign policy side. Some of it the director has spoken about, some of it the chief minister has referred to. I don't know what comes to your mind when you think of diplomacy. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it looks like a good life. Maybe it means travel, people in suits. I want to tell you, it's actually a mission. It's an obsession. It's a passion. If you really want to be good at it, you have to be driven. And what drives you is actually a sense of what you want to get from the world for your country. And today, if I were to say the way I describe, how India grows, how has our diplomacy grown? I would say perhaps more than ever before, our diplomacy is today focused on development. When we travel out, the Chief Minister referred to the Quad meeting we've had. When we go out there, we say, what is it we are going to get from this engagement, those conversations, these impressions, which we can take back to India, which will make our country a better, more advanced, a more modern society. Now, it's not unique, this is not rocket science. Actually, all countries and the bulk of actually radical transformational development in the last 150 years has actually been in Asia, starting with Japan in the 1860s. Then you had the Soviet Union in the 1920s, 30s. You had ASEAN, you had actually Korea, Taiwan, you had ASEAN, you had then China, and we are the next in that, in a sense, in the queue of development. Countries develop fastest, best, most efficiently, most economically, when they actually have that goal that my foreign interactions must have an application at home. And that, in many ways, is what today our life is about. I remind you of the example the Chief Minister gave, working with Japan to build bridges across the Brahmaputra. Working with Japan to improve the sewage and the water system of Guwahati. Now I can give you countless examples from other countries. I mean, I was in Finland. They were talking to me about using bamboo in the Numaligarh refinery to actually diversify the nature of the fuel that it produces. You can see today in our infrastructure, big corridors like the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, the Freight Corridor. the bullet train project which is now underway. Or, in fact, I kind of rewind your own life. Look at even the origins of the IITs. The IITs were all created by international partnerships. Our, I would say, I don't want to say error, but our shortcoming was that we did not keep up the pace. We did not scale up through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the way many other countries did. So we had the right ideas. We didn't apply it efficiently enough. We didn't scale it up fast enough. So you actually have a situation, it may come as a surprise to many of you, that when Rajiv Gandhi visited China in 1988, India's per capita income was about the same level as China, actually was a little bit higher. Today, China's per capita income is 5 times ours. And what's the difference? The difference was that they were much more radical about the reform, but they were much more effective and efficient in actually translating visions onto the ground. Or if I were to give you a different metaphor, they had more engineers. And they had more engineers in the decision-making level. So the point today where diplomacy is concerned, I want to make to you is we engage the world today very much with the idea that the world is a partner in technology, it is a partner in capital, it is a partner in best practices. We must have an open mind. When we see something we like, the greatest tribute you can do to a good idea is to go home and practice it yourself. And a lot of the change that especially Prime Minister Modi has brought about in the last 8 years has actually been that kind of approach to the world. The second, of course, is every society needs to be secured. And in a way, actually, diplomacy is the first line of defense. If diplomacy is successful, you don't ever need a military to defend you. So, and sometimes if you reach a stage where the military response is required, there too, defense diplomacy is a supporting force for the military. So, again, when we think of securing the country, we think typically of an adversarial state. Now, I think all of you know what I have in mind there. But think again, think locally. Till a few years ago, this region actually used to have a serious concern about terrorism, about separatism, about narcotics, about trafficking. What has helped to deal with it? Actually, diplomacy. The fact that we made sure that they got no support in any neighboring country has actually made this region and your existence much more secure, much more peaceful, and much more prosperous. So, with the evolution of technology, our sense of what is security, both in terms of problems and challenges, also change. So, when we think security today, we think today data security, we think cyber security. We worry about the normal being weaponized in many ways against a society.